Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here to share a card featuring MFT. This is for one of their sketch challenges, and as you know, I'm a big fan of MFT sketches. I regularly recommend them and link to their sketch PDFs as I think it's a great resource. I keep them in my sketch binder personally. The latest sketch made me think of this Picnic Pals stamp set from MFT. I believe it is retired now, but it's one that I really loved and felt like I had to have because I think Stacey Yacula's stamps are so adorable, but never got a chance to use until now. I purchased the coordinating dies as well because with the Stacey Yacula die or stamps, the fuzzy edges can be a little bit tricky for the scan and cut to cut out. So when this stamp and die set went on one of the MFT Wednesday Blitz Day specials, I felt like it was worth it to get the dies because it was a really good discount. Speaking of which, as this is released, it should be December 7th, 2020. December 8th through the 11th of this year, MFT is having a 20% off sale that features even their new release, and that has a lot of really cute stuff, including a Stacey Yacula set with like a tea party and these heart speech bubble dies that are a absolute must-have for me personally. All right, so I'm going to focus on the Copic coloring. That is a good chunk of this video, so just to let you know if that's not something that you're interested in, this video might not be for you, but I like to watch other people color, so I've sped it up quite a bit, and hopefully I can share a few tips and tricks in here that might be helpful to you. I am coloring a raccoon here, and I struggle sometimes with this like desire to color things accurately, and then the artist lines don't necessarily like match up and allow you to do that. So I sometimes have to practice like letting go. Like just because, I mean, the basics are there for sure, but like the raccoons have some white around the eyes. So after the eyes are like this, nice dark color, and there's some white strips around it when I look at the pictures. And so there was no lines for that from the artist, and therefore I kind of had to decide how I wanted to recreate that myself and if I wanted to. I also know that leaving things pure white, like not putting any color on the cardstock, doesn't tend to look good. It's kind of jarring. And so in this case, I started with a W5 to be sort of the blacks of the raccoon, and I chose the W markers because they have a brownish tint to them, which I think is more accurate for a raccoon. I kind of think of them as gray, but it's a very brownish gray, and therefore the W's are a really good bet for that. And then I went all the way down to a W00 for the areas that are going to be the whites on around his face. If you look at a picture of a raccoon, and here's where I'm sort of adding this detail in that maybe is more accurate, and you certainly do not have to do this if you like to just kind of follow more what the artist suggests. But I was able to, by layering up my Copics, add in that detail of the extra white area around his eyes, and also there's sort of usually just like a stripe going down. I do some super quick coloring. So I wanted to share a note about with the Copics, I started with W's and C's for grays. I do think those are the best two choices for grays if you wanted to know like what Copic grays to get. There are also the N's and, I forget what the other one is right now because I do have a few N's now, but there's a lot of grays out there. I think the C's and the W's are the most used, and I like the C's because they're great for shiny objects, like shiny gray things that maybe like are silver or metallic. And then the W's are often good for animals, but I do find that there are certain animals that I like the C's for, like sometimes like penguins, because I want them to look a little bit more cold and to pair well with the ice in their environment. Going with a cool gray tends to work. You may have noticed if you were watching some of my videos recently that I'm using the same R's over and over again. I have a pretty extensive Copic collection, but I don't really think you need one. When I do my really detailed scenes, which I do share on Instagram, it's something I've never really done on YouTube here because they just take me hours and hours to color. But if you want to see some more elaborate coloring, you can head over to my Instagram, jess.crafts, and I share much more elaborate scenes there. However, if you just get a few basics, you can wind up using them for a lot of things. So these are the same reds and the same greens that I've been using on Christmas cards lately. The R393735 and the YG171311. It's kind of a bright green for Christmas, and I do also like the higher YG 9s for Christmas as well, YG 93, 95, 97, 99. But if you only were going to get like 3 green markers, I'd probably recommend these 3. And the same thing with the red. I find that they work for a lot of things. In particular, just wanted to mention a little bit about what I've been coloring. The picnic blanket, I decided to color it all red to keep it simple and so that it was like a good base for all of the characters. I wanted more of the detail of my coloring to be in the characters so they were more the focus, but I do think, of course, a classic red and white Christmas blanket or picnic blanket could look great. My hesitation with it was also not only would it draw more attention and it would be harder to color, particularly because red, the R markers in Copics, they kind of have a mind of their own. They bleed really easily, and it's hard to push them back if they go over the line, so it's something I tend to avoid. If you are only going to get a few browns, because I like to use the same colors repeatedly, I would go with the E3 family. I find that it works well for a lot of critters. If you're getting browns more for skin tones, those might not be the ideal ones. But if you like critters, I would say that would be the go-to set of browns, the E3s. I am not worrying too much about light source, although I'm generally putting the highlights on the faces and the fronts of the critters because I would like to draw your attention to their faces. For this, I believe it's supposed to be a hedgehog. Hopefully it is, because otherwise I colored it wrong. I wanted to add some spines, some extra detail to it. And Stacey, when the artist drawn lines do kind of suggest a bit of the texture of spines, but I wanted to emphasize that. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my various E3 markers and I'm drawing little flicks, kind of like you might do for little bits of hair, as it's very similar. And I just layered them up, starting with the darker colors and going back down to the lighter colors. Then I went back to the dark colors again. And I even took the W9 and added a few more spikes of detail into the hedgehog there. Once I colored all my image, I was able to die cut them out with the coordinating dies. The sort of fuzzy edges, the artistic style of Stacey Yacula make it a little bit difficult for the scan and cut, so the dies were quite helpful in this case. But you could take a pencil and trace over some of the lines, and that might help. Like, if there's a little gap in the illustration, if you put a little pencil mark there, it can help the scan and cut read it as a more solid line. And also, once they're colored, it's less of an issue. So now I'm ready to assemble my card. As I mentioned, when I saw the sketch, the angled part of the sketch reminded me of the picnic blanket because it's on an angle. And so I thought I would create a very clean and simple card, yet still try to incorporate the sketch that maybe calls for more like pattern papers or layers or whatever. But I thought, well, what if I could just do it just with my stamps? So that's kind of my motivation or my focus today. I took all of my little bits. I like to, when I'm working with lots of little bits, put everything in some kind of bowl. A good choice is the Twiddler's Nook. She has these embellishment trays that can help you to put your sequins back in because they have like a little like lip on the side that pours the sequins out, but it's also really great for holding small things like die cut. So I just have a couple of little bowls like that in my craft room. I took a banner die that I could tell would be big enough because I kind of held it up to the stamp. And then this banner die set is a popular, like one that I use a lot. So I keep a negative of the die cut in the packaging, like in the Ziploc bag with my dies, and I keep painter's tape on it. So that way I can put it in my MISTI and the die will stick to the die cut will stick to that negative piece and allow me to stamp on it perfectly straight. I hope that makes sense. But like, I'm instead of creating a new negative each time to help me stamp things in my MISTI, I'm just holding on to it and I'm permanently keeping it in the bag with my stamps because it just makes it a little bit easier. I also, sometimes I like to cut a bunch of banner dies and stamp a bunch at a time. So I also keep it on hand, like a set of banner dies cut together, just so that I'm not constantly having to think about it and I can use scraps more for cutting out my banners. I am using really thick pieces of cardstock to pop things up instead of foam tape, just because, like, for instance, what I'm using now is like the back of a 6x6 pad, so that kind of like chipboardy piece. And so usually that would just go into the recycling, but I've saved it, or I take some of my cardstock scraps and I glue them together, and that's how I'm popping things up. I'm adhering down a lot of this with my Barely Arts glue because if that holds really, really strongly, and in fact holds really, really quickly too, so you don't have a ton of time to wiggle anything around. That it might be a drawback for some people, but I appreciate that it holds strong and quickly. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to add all 3 critters, but I did decide in the end to add my little hedgehog as well. I like that they are facing in different directions so that they can interact easily in the scene. And once I have him on, I'm about done with my card, but I do want to trim off these edges. I find it much easier to glue everything down and then trim it off in the end rather than try to cut it beforehand. And that is my clean and simple but complicated Copic coloring interpretation of this MFT sketch. I did get a little bit of ink off to the corner here, so I'm just going to quickly take in my Couture Creations Creative Detailer and just rub away that ink a little bit. A Tombow Mono Sand Eraser also works pretty well for that. Alright, so that is it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will leave you links to the products that I mentioned in the video description below, as well as to my Instagram if you want to check out some of that other Copic coloring. And here are some videos you might like. Have an awesome day. Bye!